Okay, so with this deck, a new hand trap came out recently that allows you to gain a whole bunch of life points, where you use it and every time your opponent special summons a monster, you gain life points equal to its attack. And I thought that was a great time to revisit my life point gain mill deck, where you're trying to give your opponent life points and mill them with cards like Side Effects, and giving them Pot of Desires through Gift Exchange. None of that really happened too much. I only won like one game through Deck Out, and the rest of them were just kind of won through the very small Trickstar engine I run in Order Incarnation, and the fact that I tried out Orbital Hydralander build, and that seemed to actually work pretty decently. Okay, end of video, final thoughts on the deck. I think the deck kind of failed at its original purpose of trying to gain life points and mill. But I also think this deck is a lot better than the other one because it's more consistent with the trick stars. You see, I try not to use like meta engines if I can avoid it, because they usually overpower the gimmick of the deck, and I would be making suboptimal plays if I didn't use them, you know, according to everything else, in lieu of everything else. And that's kind of like this is just another example of, you know, why that happens. The trick stars, they were the star of the show. Pretty much every duel involved lots of trick star shenanigans, and I don't even really play trick stars, so I made a lot of mistakes. I kept forgetting to use light stage too, pop back row, and I think I even canceled out of its search once, which lost me a game. No, not once. I canceled out of a search twice. One of them was in the video, another one was in the game I lost because of that card advantage loss. Like, if I had just been able to summon one monster, I would have been able to stall out long enough for a win. And the original strategy of giving my opponent gift exchange with Pot of Desires, when I was first testing this deck, I kept drawing all of my Pot of Desires, which really sucked because I kept milling myself, basically just using them all, and it just banished all my combo pieces. I just kept falling to, you know, the downside of Pot of Desires is it banishes all of your combo pieces, maybe, and I kept running into that problem. So I like cut back on the gift exchange because I was drawing into all of them, and gift exchange, if you draw more than one of them, is kind of bad anyway. And I wanted to make this deck more consistent, so I cut out a lot of the cards that I thought would not make it very consistent, which is having multiple gift exchanges or side effects, or this new card right here. I don't think I used it in the original one, Refuge of Audacity. This card was like made for life point gain mill decks. Well, I mean life point gain decks, not my weird mill deck that never really mills. Every time your opponent summons a monster, you gain 300 life points, and while your life points are higher than 10,000, your monsters can't be destroyed by a battle, which actually allowed me to stall out for a bit in a couple of the games, which was nice. Usually when I use this card in testing, it gets destroyed immediately, and I never really got to use it, but this time around, it stayed around a lot longer, which was nice. So I also tried out a new thing, Orbital Hydralander. I forgot why I tried it out. I think I just had the idea, and I was like, you know what, I run, you know, a whole bunch of 1-ofs anyway. The only thing I'd have to do is like cut back on my hand protection with my Scarecrow and Battle Fader. And I don't think any of them showed up in any of my winning duels. I used them a lot, because I tested this deck a lot, and I lost a lot. But I did manage to get some wins for a video. And these guys were very prominent in those losses. Which is to say, they weren't very, you know, the trick stars, I guess that's why the trick stars probably seemed like they were more important than they were, because in the duels in which I used them a lot are the duels in which I usually won. I also started using the trick stars link monsters because it was a good way to get monsters in the graveyard for Hydralander, because for those of you who don't know what this card does, you need to have 5 monsters with different names in your graveyard in order to special summon this card from your hand. And then it has a spell speed 2 effect where you can mill the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard to destroy 1 card on the field. But once you do that, once you do the 3 card to mill, it'll check your graveyard to make sure you don't have any copies of monsters in it. So you have to basically only run 1 copy of each of your monsters in your deck. And because of this, you know, I only did that, but I also still ran 3 copies of my most important cards, which were, of course, Orbital Hydralander and the new hand trap. I still ran 3 copies of each, and I know that's a risk. That's like a risk I'm willing to take, kind of like how people run Brilliant Fusion with Garnet, and they only run 1 copy. They risk drawing it. This is kind of the thing. You need the consistency of actually drawing the Hydralanders, otherwise why are you playing, you know, 1 card of each of your monsters? But also, usually don't run 3 copies of another card as well, and I kind of just wanted the whole reason I built this deck was for the new hand trap, so I ran 3 copies of it anyway, even though it's counterintuitive to a Orbital Hydralander build. And it seemed to work fine. Like, there was one time when I brought out Hydralander, and I used its effect to mill, and I milled one of the other Hydralanders to the graveyard, which is fine, except for the fact that they chained a Ghost Ogre to it, so it destroyed the card, and it went to the graveyard, and the effect on the field checked the graveyard, and since there was 2 copies of Hydralander there, it didn't go off. I was like, wow, that's annoying. Like, what are the chances of that? And it's like, the chances are pretty good, actually, because I'm running 3 copies of them. But I never got into the problem with having, 3 of these guys in the graveyard. Surprisingly, even though in one of the duels I used like 2 Hydralander's effects like 5 or 6 times, I never didn't get to destroy a card during that duel, which was pretty lucky. And whatchamacallit, there was a couple of duels I did in testing where I didn't have Dried Winds in it, and that sucked. Dried Winds is super important to this deck because it's the only thing that allows you to actually pop cards in the field, because one of the problems with this deck is it tries to just gain life points and stall, but then your opponent's just going to build a board if you don't actually interact with their field, and they'll eventually be able just to destroy all your cards, so you won't be able to stall forever, and you can't stall with just continuous spell and traps unless they somehow stop your opponent from special summoning, which this deck doesn't do. So I needed ways to destroy their cards, and that's why I used Orbital Hydralander. It seemed like an easy way to get destruction and disruption. And also Dried Winds helps with that as well. And I think this version works a lot better than the other one. Although the other one I did, it's fine too, I guess.